Isabella Carter was desperate. Her mother was sick, and she had no choice but to bring her 6-year-old son, Mikey, to work. Her millionaire boss, Graham Kingston, was known for his cold demeanor, but when Mikey accidentally broke his favorite mug, something shocking happened. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. Isabella Carter rushed around her small apartment, frantically gathering papers that had spilled from her work folder. Her dark curls, usually neatly styled, fell loose around her face as sweat beaded on her forehead. "Mikey, where are your shoes, baby? We're late," she called out, her voice tight with stress. The sound of cartoons blared from the living room. Isabella took a deep breath, counting to 3 in her head before marching over to the TV. "Michael Anthony Carter," she said firmly, turning down the volume. "I need you to focus. Shoes. Now." 6-year-old Mikey looked up at her with big brown eyes that matched her own. "But Mom, Spider-Man is just about to—" "Spider-Man will have to wait. Grandma is sick, and I have no choice but to take you to work with me today." She knelt down, to his level. "This is very important. My boss, Mr. Kingston, doesn't like surprises. He doesn't like noise, and he definitely doesn't like children in the office." Mikey frowned. "He doesn't like kids? What's wrong with him?" Despite her stress, Isabella smiled. "Nothing's wrong with him, he's just serious. All business." She smoothed Mikey's unruly curls. "I need you to be on your very best behavior today. Color quietly at my desk. No running. No yelling. Can you promise me that?" "I promise," Mikey said solemnly, holding up his little hand. Isabella knew better than to fully trust a 6-year-old's promise, but she was out of options. Her mother had called at 5 a.m. with a fever, and Isabella couldn't afford to miss work. Not when she was still proving herself as executive assistant to Graham Kingston, CEO of Kingston Enterprises. An hour later, Isabella hurried across the lobby of the gleaming office building, gripping Mikey's hand tightly. She nodded at the security guard, who raised his eyebrows at the sight of the child but didn't comment. "Remember what we talked about," she whispered to Mikey as they entered the elevator. The Kingston Enterprises office took up the entire 32nd floor with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a spectacular view of the city. Isabella's desk was positioned right outside Graham Kingston's corner office, giving her a clear view of who came and went. "Wow," Mikey exclaimed, pressing his face against the glass. "We're so high up. Can birds fly this high, Mom?" "Shh," Isabella cautioned, quickly setting up a small space for him with coloring books and quiet toys she'd packed. "Yes, some birds can. Now please sit here and color while I get some work done." She glanced nervously at Graham's closed office door. It was only 7:30 a.m. He usually didn't arrive until 8, which gave her time to get Mikey settled and explain the situation to her co-workers. Sandra from accounting walked by, stopping when she spotted Mikey. "Well, who's this handsome young man?" she asked with a smile. "This is my son, Mikey. My mom is sick, so he's hanging out with me today," Isabella explained quickly. Sandra's smile faltered. "Does Graham know?" Isabella shook her head. "I'll tell him when he arrives. It's just for today." "Good luck with that," Sandra whispered, patting Isabella's arm sympathetically before continuing on her way. Isabella knew what everyone thought of Graham Kingston. Cold, demanding, ruthless in business. He'd earned his reputation as one of the toughest CEOs in the industry. At 38, he'd built Kingston Enterprises from a small tech startup into a billion-dollar corporation. There were rumors about his past, a broken engagement, family estrangement, but Graham never discussed his personal life. In the 9 months she'd worked for him, Isabella had managed to establish an efficient professional relationship with Graham. He respected her work and she admired his business acumen, but he'd never smiled at her. Not once. "Mom, I'm thirsty," Mikey said, interrupting her thoughts. "Okay, baby, let me get you some water. Stay right here, okay? Don't move from this spot." She fixed him with her sternest look. Mikey nodded, returning to his coloring book. Isabella hurried to the break room, filled a paper cup with water, and grabbed a few cookies from the communal snack table. She was halfway back to her desk when she heard it, a crash followed by the sound of breaking ceramic. Her heart stopped. She ran back to her desk, but Mikey was gone. The door to Mom. Graham's office was ajar. "Oh no," she whispered, dropping the cup of water. Isabella rushed into Graham's office to find Mikey standing frozen, eyes wide with fear, next to Graham's desk. At his feet lay the shattered remains of a coffee mug, and there, sitting behind the massive oak desk, was Graham Kingston himself. He must have come in through the private entrance while she was in the break room. Isabella's stomach churned with dread. Graham was staring at Mikey, his expression unreadable. His dark hair was perfectly styled as always, his tailored grey suit impeccable. His piercing blue eyes moved from the broken mug to the child. "Mr. Kingston, I am so sorry," Isabella began, her voice trembling. "My mother is sick and I had no childcare. I just stepped away for 1 minute." Graham held up his hand, silencing her. He leaned forward in his chair, studying Mikey for a long moment. "Well, kid," he said finally, his deep voice surprisingly gentle, "that was my favorite mug. What do we do now?" Mikey swallowed hard, his little chin quivering. "Say sorry?" Isabella held her breath, waiting for the explosion, for the firing. That would surely follow. Instead, Graham's stern face transformed. His lips curved upward and he smiled. Actually smiled. "Good answer," he said, and then, to Isabella's complete shock, he stood and walked around the desk. He knelt beside Mikey, putting himself at eye level with the boy, and ruffled his curls. "I like you, lil buddy." Isabella stared, unable to believe what she was seeing. In all her time at Kingston Enterprises, she had never seen Graham interact with a child, never seen him kneel down, never seen him smile like that. "I'm really sorry." "About your cup, mister," Mikey said earnestly. "I was just looking at your cool robot thing." He pointed to a sleek metallic award on Graham's desk. "That's an Industry Innovation Award," Graham explained. "And don't worry about the mug. Accidents happen." He looked up at Isabella. "Though I would like to know why there's a child in my office at 7:45 in the morning." "Mr. Kingston, I can explain." Isabella started, her mind racing to formulate an apology that might save her job. "It's my fault," Mikey interrupted. "Grandma's sick and Mum had no one to watch me, and she said you don't like kids, but I promised to be good and then I wasn't." His words came out in a rush. Graham raised an eyebrow, looking back at Isabella. "I don't like kids." Isabella felt her face flush. I just meant you prefer a professional environment, sir." Graham stood, straightening his suit jacket. "Ms. Carter, may I speak with you privately?" Isabella's heart sank. This was it. She was about to be fired. "Mikey, go sit. At my desk, please. I need to talk to Mr. Kingston." Mikey nodded, clearly sensing the tension. He walked to the door, then turned back. "Are you going to fire my mum?" he asked Graham directly. Graham looked surprised by the question. "No, I'm not going to fire your mom," he said firmly. Relief flooded Isabella, but she remained cautious as Mikey left the office. "I'm truly sorry about this, Mr. Kingston," she said once they were alone. "My mother usually watches him, but she called this morning with a fever. I didn't have time to find another sitter, and I couldn't miss work because of the Denver's presentation this afternoon." "Isabella," Graham interrupted, using her first name for the first time ever. "It's fine. Kids have emergencies. Parents have to adapt." She blinked in surprise. "Thank you for understanding." "How old is he?" Graham asked, glancing through the glass wall to where Mikey sat at her desk, swinging his legs. 6, Isabella answered. "He's in 1st grade." Graham nodded, a strange expression crossing his face. "He seems like a good kid." "He is," Isabella said, feeling a surge of maternal pride. "He's the best thing in my life." Something flickered in Graham's eyes, something that looked almost like longing. But it disappeared so quickly Isabella thought she might have imagined it. "Look," Graham said, returning to his desk. "He can stay today. There's a small conference room down the hall that no one is using. Set him up in there where he'll be comfortable. You can check on him between tasks." Isabella stared at her boss in disbelief. "Really? That's incredibly kind of you, Mr. Kingston." Graham shrugged, already turning his attention to his computer. "It's practical. You're more valuable here than at home, and the conference room is just sitting empty." Isabella nodded, recognizing the dismissal. "Thank you, sir. I won't let this affect my work." "One more thing," Graham said as she reached the door. "Does he like burgers?" The question was so unexpected that Isabella turned back with a confused expression. "Excuse me? Burgers. Does your son like them?" Graham repeated, his expression serious. "Yes, he loves them." "Why?" Graham nodded as if confirming something to himself. "I was thinking of ordering lunch from Morton's. They make a decent burger." Isabella wasn't sure she'd heard correctly. Was Graham Kingston the man who typically ate salads at his desk while continuing to work, suggesting ordering lunch for her son? "That's very thoughtful, but I packed him a lunch," she said. "Fine," Graham said, returning to his email. "But the offer stands if you change your mind." Isabella left his office, feeling like she'd stepped into an alternate reality. She found Mikey exactly where she'd left him, coloring quietly. "Am I in big trouble?" he whispered when she approached. She knelt beside him, straightening his t-shirt. "No, baby. Mr. Kingston said you can stay today. I'm going to set you up in a nice room where you can play, but you need to be very quiet and very good, okay?" Mikey nodded solemnly. "He's not as scary as you said, Mom. He has nice eyes." Isabella glanced back at Graham's office, where he was now on the phone, his expression once again serious and focused. "I guess he does," she admitted. Later that morning, Isabella had just settled Mikey in the conference room with his coloring books when her desk phone rang. "Isabella, could you come in here, please?" Graham's voice sounded strange. She quickly made her way to his office, worried that he'd reconsidered his generosity. Graham was standing by the window, hands in his pockets. "I have to go to the Westbrook meeting at 11. I should be back by 1. He hesitated. "I was wondering if your son might like to have lunch with me when I return. With you too, of course," he added quickly. Isabella was speechless. What was happening? Why was Graham Kingston, the man whose coldness was legendary throughout the company, suddenly interested in having lunch with a 6-year-old? "That's very kind, but—" "It's just lunch, Isabella," Graham said, a hint of defensiveness in his voice. "I don't often get to talk to kids. They're refreshingly honest." Something in his expression made Isabella pause. There was a vulnerability there she'd never seen before. "All right," she said slowly. "Mikey would love to have lunch with you." "So would I." Graham nodded once, his professional mask sliding back into place. "Good. We'll eat in the executive dining room at 1:15. And Isabella—" "Yes?" A ghost of the smile he'd given Mikey earlier returned. "Make sure he knows I'm not scary." As Graham left for his meeting, Isabella returned to the conference room where Mikey was coloring a superhero picture. She watched him for a moment, his little face scrunched in concentration, and wondered what it was about her son that had cracked Graham Kingston's icy exterior. And she wondered, with equal confusion, why the thought of having lunch with her boss made her stomach flutter with something that felt distinctly like anticipation. The executive dining room at Kingston Enterprises was usually reserved for board meetings and important clients. With its dark mahogany table, plush chairs, and stunning city views, it was designed to impress. Isabella had only been in this room a handful of times, always to serve coffee or deliver documents, never to eat lunch, and certainly never with her son and her boss. "This place is fancy," Mikey whispered, his eyes wide as he climbed onto one of the high-backed chairs. "Like a castle." Graham, who had just returned from his meeting, chuckled. The sound was so unexpected that Isabella glanced at him in surprise. She'd never heard him laugh before. "It is a bit much," Graham agreed, loosening his tie slightly. "But the food is good." The private dining staff had already set the table with 3 places. A waiter appeared almost immediately, placing a basket of warm bread in the center. "I took the liberty of ordering ahead," Graham explained. "Cheeseburgers for everyone, medium rare for us, well done for the little man. Is that all right?" Isabella nodded, still trying to process this new version of her boss. Gone was the stern, distant man she'd worked for these past 9 months. In his place was someone almost approachable. "So, Mikey," Graham began, "your mum tells me you're in 1st grade. Do you like school?" Mikey, who had been eyeing the breadbasket hungrily, looked up. "It's okay, I like recess and science. Reading is hard sometimes." "Reading was hard for me too at your age," Graham said, surprising Isabella again. "Really?" Mikey asked, clearly skeptical that this important man in a suit had ever struggled with anything. Graham nodded seriously. "Really? The letters kept—" jumping around on the page, but I practiced every day and eventually it got easier. That's what Mom says, practice, practice, practice. Mikey rolled his eyes dramatically, making Graham smile. The waiter returned with their meals. Enormous. Gourmet burgers on brioche buns, accompanied by golden French fries. "Wow!" Mikey exclaimed. "This is the biggest burger I've ever seen." As they ate, Isabella watched in amazement as her usually quiet, serious son chatted animatedly with Graham. Even more surprising was how Graham responded, asking thoughtful questions, listening intently to Mikey's rambling stories about school and his friends. And then Tyler brought his lizard for show and tell, and Ms. Peterson almost fainted, Mikey said, gesturing with a French fry. Graham laughed again, and this time Isabella couldn't help but notice how it transformed his face. The stern lines softened and his blue eyes crinkled at the corners. He looked younger somehow, more human. "I had a pet lizard when I was about your age," Graham said. "Named him Rex, like a dinosaur." Mikey's eyes widened. "Cool. Mom says we can't have pets because our apartment is too small and she works too much." An awkward silence fell. Isabella felt her cheeks flush. She didn't want Graham thinking she was complaining about her work hours. She began. "That makes sense," Graham interrupted smoothly. "Pets are a big responsibility. Maybe when you're older." The conversation moved on, but Isabella noticed Graham glancing at her thoughtfully throughout the meal. As lunch concluded, Graham checked his watch. "I have a conference call in 10 minutes, but this was nice." He seemed almost surprised by his own assessment. "Thank you for lunch, Mr. Kingston," Isabella said formally, standing to leave. "Graham," he corrected. "Call me Graham, at least when we're not in a formal setting." "Thank you, Graham," she replied, testing the name. It felt strange on her tongue. "After months of Mr. Kingston, can we have lunch again tomorrow?" Mikey asked boldly. Isabella tensed. "Mikey, that's not—" "I'd like that," Graham said, cutting her off again. "If it's all right with your mom, of course." All eyes turned to Isabella. She hesitated, unsure what was happening. Was her boss just being kind to a child? Or was there something else going on? "My mother should be feeling better tomorrow," she said carefully. "Mikey will be back at her house." Was it her imagination? Or did disappointment flash across Graham's face? "Of course," he said, his professional mask sliding back into place. "Well, it was nice meeting you properly, Mikey. Thanks for keeping me company at lunch." Mikey grinned up at him. "You're not scary at all. I like you." A strange expression crossed Graham's face, something between surprise and pleasure. "I like you too, lil buddy," he said softly, ruffling Mikey's curls as he had that morning. Back at her desk, Isabella tried to make sense of the day's events. Her colleagues had been giving her curious looks all afternoon. She'd seen Sandra from accounting whispering with David from marketing, both of them glancing her way. By 3 p.m., the rumors had clearly spread throughout the office. Heather, Graham's previous assistant, who now worked in HR, stopped by Isabella's desk with a flimsy excuse about updating emergency contact information. "So," Heather said, leaning in conspiratorially, "I heard the Ice King had lunch with you and your son." Isabella frowned at the nickname. "Mr. Kingston was kind enough to accommodate my childcare emergency today." Heather's perfectly plucked eyebrows rose. "Kind, Graham? Kingston? Are we talking about the same man? In the 3 years I worked for him, he never once asked about my personal life, let alone had lunch with me. He was just being a good boss," Isabella insisted, although she wasn't entirely convinced. Herself, Heather looked skeptical. "Graham doesn't do anything without a reason. Just be careful, okay?" The warning left Isabella feeling uneasy, but before she could ask what Heather meant, Graham's office door opened. "Isabella, could you come in here, please?" he called, his voice back to its usual businesslike tone. Inside his office, Graham was standing by the window again, looking out at the city skyline. He turned when she entered, his expression unreadable. "Is everything all right with the Denver's presentation?" she asked, assuming this was about work. "The presentation is fine," he said, waving his hand dismissively. "I wanted to talk about your work schedule." Isabella's heart sank. Here it came, the reprimand for bringing Mikey to work, despite his earlier understanding. "I've been thinking," Graham continued, that your hours are quite demanding, especially for a single parent. I manage fine, Isabella said quickly. Today was an exception. It won't happen again. Graham frowned. That's not what I meant. I'm not criticizing you, Isabella. I'm concerned. She blinked in surprise. Concerned? Yes. He seemed uncomfortable now, shifting his weight slightly. It occurred to me during lunch that there might be a better way to structure your schedule, one that allows you more time with your son. Isabella wasn't sure she was following. Are you reducing my hours? That would mean a pay cut she couldn't afford. No, not at all, Graham said quickly. Your salary would remain the same. But I thought perhaps you could work from home 2 days a week. Many of your duties can be performed remotely. Isabella stared at him, stunned. Why would you do that? Graham looked away, back toward the window. It's the right thing to do. You're an excellent assistant, Isabella. I don't want to lose you because the job demands are incompatible with your personal responsibilities. It was a reasonable explanation, but something in his tone made Isabella think there was more to it. Thank you, she said sincerely. That's incredibly generous. Graham nodded once, businesslike again. We'll start next week, Mondays and Wednesdays at home. You'll need to be available by phone, of course, and come in for important meetings. Of course, Isabella agreed, still trying to process this unexpected turn of events. Good, that's all. Graham turned back to his computer, dismissing her. As Isabella left his office, she couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had changed between them. One day, one broken coffee mug and one lunch with her son had somehow transformed her coldly efficient boss into someone who cared about her work-life balance. It didn't make sense. At 5 p.m., Isabella packed up her things and collected Mikey from the conference room, where he'd been happily drawing all afternoon. Time to go home, sweetheart, she said, helping him gather his crayons. Can I say goodbye to Mr. Graham? Mikey asked. Isabella hesitated. Graham was on an important call with investors in Tokyo. He's busy right now, baby. We'll see him tomorrow. Mikey looked disappointed but nodded. As they waited for the elevator, Isabella was surprised to hear rapid footsteps behind them. Leaving without saying goodbye? Graham's deep voice made them both turn. You were on your call, Isabella explained. I didn't want to interrupt. Graham crouched down to Mikey's level. I wanted to give you something before you left, he said, pulling a small box from his pocket. I had my assistant run out and get it this afternoon. Mikey took the box eagerly and opened it. Inside was a small toy robot, similar to the award statue on Graham's desk that had fascinated Mikey that morning. Wow, thanks, Mr. Graham, Mikey exclaimed, examining the toy with delight. You're welcome, lil buddy, Graham said, smiling that transformed smile again. He glanced up at Isabella. I hope that's okay. She nodded, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gesture. It's very kind of you. Graham stood, suddenly seeming uncertain, a strange look on a man who radiated confidence in business settings. Well, good night then, he said formally. Good night, Graham, Isabella replied as the elevator doors closed. Mikey looked up at his mother with wise eyes that sometimes seemed too knowing for his 6 years. I think Mr. Graham is lonely, Mom, he said matter-of-factly. Isabella considered this. What makes you say that? Mikey shrugged, returning his attention to his new toy. His office doesn't have any pictures, just awards, and he looked happy when we had lunch with him. Like how you look when Grandma comes over and you get to talk to a grown-up. Out of the mouths of babes, Isabella thought. Maybe her son was onto something. That night, after tucking Mikey into bed, Isabella sat on her small balcony with a glass of wine, thinking about the day's events. She'd gone to work that morning terrified that bringing Mikey would cost her her job. Instead, she'd discovered an entirely different side to Graham Kingston. Her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from a number she didn't recognize. I hope Mikey liked the robot. If you need to bring him in tomorrow, the conference room is still available. GK. Isabella stared at the message. How had Graham gotten her personal cell number? And why? Was he texting her after hours about her son? She typed back a polite response. He loves it. Thank you again for your understanding today. My mother is feeling better, so Mikey will be with her tomorrow. The reply came almost immediately. "I'm glad to hear she's better. Good night, Isabella." She found herself smiling at the simple message, then quickly caught herself. This was her boss, a man known for his ruthless business tactics and cold demeanor, a man who, until today, had never shown the slightest interest in her personal life. Yet she couldn't reconcile that reputation with the man who had knelt beside her son, who had listened to Mikey's stories with genuine interest, who had bought him a toy robot just because it had caught his eye. Isabella's phone buzzed again. "One more thing. Would you and Mikey like to join me for dinner on Friday? There's an excellent pizza place near Central Park, very kid-friendly." Isabella nearly dropped her phone. Was Graham Kingston asking her on a date? A date that included her son? Her finger hovered over the keyboard. She should say no. Mixing her personal and professional lives was a bad idea. Dating her boss, if that's what this was an even worse one. But then she remembered the way Graham had smiled at lunch, the genuine way he'd engaged with Mikey, the unexpected kindness he'd shown both of them. Against her better judgment, she typed, "Mikey loves pizza. What time?" As she pressed send, Isabella couldn't help but wonder if this was the beginning of something wonderful or a complicated mistake she'd come to regret. The next few days passed in a blur. Isabella's mother recovered quickly, taking Mikey back to her house during work hours. The office returned to its normal routine, except for one significant change. Graham Kingston smiled now, not all the time and not at everyone. But whenever Isabella entered his office, his stern expression softened. When he passed her desk, he'd often pause to chat briefly. Small talk, something he'd never engaged in before. The office was buzzing with speculation. The Ice King was thawing, and everyone wanted to know why. By Friday afternoon, Isabella was a bundle of nerves. She'd told herself repeatedly that dinner with Graham was not a date. It was just a nice gesture from a boss who had unexpectedly bonded with her son. So, why had she changed outfits 3 times before picking Mikey up from school? "Are we really having dinner with Mr. Graham?" Mikey asked excitedly as they rode the subway home. "Yes, if you still want to," Isabella replied. "Yes," Mikey pumped his fist in the air. "Can I show him my new Spider-Man comic?" Isabella smiled. "If you want to." It was strange how quickly Mikey had become attached to Graham. Just one lunch together, and her son was acting like Graham was his new best friend. At home, Isabella freshened up her makeup and changed into a simple but flattering blue dress. Not too formal, not too casual. Definitely not date attire, she told herself firmly. At exactly 6:30, her doorbell rang. Graham was right on time. Isabella took a deep breath before opening the door. Graham stood in the hallway, looking different in dark jeans and a light grey sweater. More approachable, almost. Handsome, she thought, then immediately pushed the observation away. "Hi," she said suddenly, feeling shy. "Hi," Graham replied, his eyes taking in her appearance with an appreciative glance that made her cheeks warm. "Mr. Graham." Mikey came barreling down the hallway, breaking the moment. "I brought my Spider-Man comic to show you." Graham's face lit up at the sight of Mikey. "Hey, lil buddy, I can't wait to see it." As they walked to the restaurant, Mikey between them, chattering away, Isabella couldn't help but notice how natural it felt, like they were a regular family on a Friday night outing. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. The pizza place was exactly as Graham had described, casual, noisy, and filled with families. Not the kind of establishment she would have expected the CEO of Kingston Enterprises to frequent. "I used to come here with my father when I was a boy," Graham explained as they were seated. It hasn't changed much. It was the first personal detail he'd ever shared with her. "Do you still come here with him?" Mikey asked innocently. A shadow crossed Graham's face. "No, my father passed away a long time ago." "My dad's gone too," Mikey said matter-of-factly. "Mom says he didn't want to be a daddy," Isabella winced. "Mikey, that's not quite—" "It's his loss," Graham interrupted, his voice gentle but firm. "Any man would be lucky to be your dad." Isabella felt a lump form in her throat at the sincerity in Graham's voice. Dinner was surprisingly relaxed. They ordered a large pizza with half pepperoni for Mikey and half margarita for the adults. Graham listened patiently as Mikey explained the entire plot of his Spider-Man comic, asking questions that delighted the boy. Isabella found herself watching them together, struck by how good Graham was with her son. It was so unexpected, so at odds with his reputation. "What?" Graham asked, catching her staring. "Nothing," she said quickly. "It's just... You're very good with him." Graham's expression turned wistful. "Kids are easy. They say what they mean, no games, no hidden agendas." "Unlike the business world," Isabella observed. Graham nodded. "Exactly." He hesitated, then added, "I always wanted children." The admission hung in the air between them, intimate and revealing. "Why don't you have any?" Mikey asked, oblivious to the tension. "Mikey," Isabella admonished gently, "that's a personal question." "It's okay," Graham said. He looked directly at Mikey. "I never found the right person to have a family with, and then work became my whole life." "That's sad," Mikey declared. Graham smiled, but there was pain behind it. Sometimes it is. Later, as they walked back to Isabella's apartment, Mikey ran a few steps ahead, fascinated by the city lights. "Thank you for dinner," Isabella said. "Mikey had a wonderful time." "So did I," Graham replied. Then, more quietly, "So did I." There was something in his voice that made Isabella look up at him. In the glow of the street lamps, his blue eyes were intense, focused entirely on her. "Graham," she began, not sure what she wanted to say. "Mom! Mr. Graham! Look at that cool car!" Mikey called, breaking the moment. By the time they reached Isabella's apartment, Mikey was yawning despite his excitement. "Time for bed, young man," Isabella said, unlocking the door. "But I'm not tired," Mikey protested, even as he rubbed his eyes. Graham chuckled. "Tell you what, lil' buddy, get a good night's sleep and maybe tomorrow we can go to the park. If you're..." "Mom says it's okay," he added quickly, glancing at Isabella. "Can we, Mom, please?" Mikey begged. Isabella hesitated. One dinner was one thing, but now Graham was suggesting more plans, more time together outside of work. "We'll see," she said finally, unwilling to commit either way. Mikey seemed satisfied with that answer. He surprised both adults by throwing his arms around Graham's waist in a quick hug. "Good night, Mr. Graham. Thanks for the pizza." Graham looked momentarily stunned, then gently patted Mikey's back. "Good night, Mikey. Thanks for sharing your Spider-Man stories." After Mikey went inside, Isabella lingered in the doorway with Graham. "He's quite something, your son," Graham said softly. "Yes, he is," Isabella agreed. "He's taken quite a shine to you." Graham's expression turned serious. "Isabella, I want to be clear about something. I enjoy spending time with Mikey and with you, but I understand if you're uncomfortable with this arrangement. If you'd prefer to keep our relationship strictly professional, just say the word." Isabella studied his face, trying to understand what was happening between them. "What do you want, Graham?" He seemed taken aback by the direct question. "I want..." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I want to see where this goes, whatever this is." Isabella's heart raced. This was dangerous territory. He was still her boss, still held power over her career. But the man standing before her now, with vulnerability in his eyes, seemed worlds away from the cold executive she'd first met 9 months ago. "One day at a time," she said finally. "We can go to the park tomorrow. But Graham..." "Yes?" "I need to protect Mikey. He's already getting attached to you. If this is just, I don't know, some kind of phase or curiosity for you, tell me now." Graham's expression grew solemn. "Isabella, I've never been more serious about anything in my life." The conviction in his voice both thrilled and terrified her. "Good night, Graham," she said softly. "Good night, Isabella," he replied, and before she could react, he leaned in and pressed a gentle kiss to her cheek. As she closed the door, behind her, Isabella leaned against it, her heart pounding. What had started as an emergency childcare situation had somehow, in just a few days, turned her entire life upside down. And despite all the rational reasons to be cautious, she couldn't help but feel a flutter of excitement about what tomorrow might bring. The next morning dawned bright and clear, perfect weather for a day at the park. Isabella woke early, her mind still swirling with thoughts of Graham. The gentle kiss on her cheek had left her confused and excited all at once. Mikey, on the other hand, had no such confusion. He bounded out of bed, already talking a mile a minute about what games he wanted to play with Mr. Graham. Do you think he knows how to play catch? Will he push me on the swings? Can we get hot dogs? The questions came rapid fire as Isabella helped him get dressed. Slow down, baby, she laughed. I'm sure Mr. Graham will do whatever you want to do. But remember, he's a grown-up, so he might get tired faster than you. Mikey considered this seriously. I'll make sure he takes breaks, he decided, making Isabella smile at his thoughtfulness. At precisely 10 a.m., the doorbell rang. Graham stood in the hallway looking even more casual than the night before, in jeans and a navy blue Henley that made his eyes seem even bluer. Good morning, he said, his smile warm. Ready for the park? Mr. Graham, Mikey exclaimed, rushing forward. I brought my ball so we can play catch. Sounds great, lil buddy, Graham replied, ruffling Mikey's curls in what was becoming a familiar gesture. As they walked to Central Park, Isabella couldn't help noticing how different Graham seemed outside the office. More relaxed, more open. He walked beside them with an easy stride, listening attentively as Mikey chatted about school and his friends. How long have you lived in the city? Graham asked Isabella as they entered the park. Since college, she replied. I came to NYU on a scholarship and never left. What about you? Born and raised here, Graham said, though I spent a few years in Boston for business school. Harvard, Isabella guessed. Graham nodded, looking slightly embarrassed. It was my father's alma mater. He wouldn't have accepted. Anything else? He sounds strict, Isabella observed. A shadow crossed Graham's face. He was demanding, expected perfection. Before Isabella could respond, Mikey tugged at Graham's hand. Can we play now, please? Graham's expression immediately brightened. Absolutely. What shall we do first? The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Graham threw himself into every game with unexpected enthusiasm. He played catch with Mikey, pushed him on the swings, and even joined him on the jungle gym, much to the amusement of other parents. Isabella watched them together, a strange feeling growing in her chest. Graham showed no signs of the coldness or impatience she'd come to expect from him at work. Instead, he was patient, kind, and surprisingly playful. Mom, watch this, Mikey called as Graham taught him how to throw a frisbee. I see you, baby, she called back, smiling. A woman sitting on the bench beside Isabella leaned over. Your husband is so good with your son, she commented. Isabella felt her cheeks flush. Oh, he's not my husband. He's just a friend. The woman raised her eyebrows but said nothing more. After another hour of play, even Mikey's boundless energy began to wane. Graham suggested they stop for lunch at a nearby cafe with outdoor seating. I'm starving, Mikey announced as they sat down. Graham laughed. Me too, lil buddy. All that running around worked up my appetite. They ordered sandwiches and lemonade, enjoying the beautiful spring day. When Mikey spotted an ice cream vendor after lunch, Graham immediately offered to buy him a cone. Is that okay? He asked Isabella, suddenly remembering to check with her. Sure, she said, touched by his thoughtfulness. Just one scoop, though. I don't want him on a sugar high all afternoon. One scoop it is, Graham agreed, taking Mikey's hand and leading him to the vendor. Isabella watched them walk away, struck by how natural they looked together. Anyone would think they were father and son. The thought both warmed and troubled her. Mikey had never had a father figure in his life. His biological father had disappeared the moment Isabella told him she was pregnant. She'd been so careful since then, never dating anyone seriously, never letting anyone get close enough to hurt either of them. Yet here was Graham Kingston, CEO and notorious Ice King, somehow breaking through all her carefully constructed barriers in just a few days. Mom, Graham got chocolate chip, Mikey called as they returned, ice cream already smeared around his mouth. Isabella raised an eyebrow at Graham. Just one scoop. Graham had the grace to look sheepish. It might be a very large scoop, he admitted, but it's Saturday. Rules are a little more flexible on weekends, right? He looked so hopeful that Isabella couldn't help but laugh. I suppose they are, she conceded. As the afternoon wore on, Mikey's energy finally began to flag. By 4 o'clock, he was yawning and rubbing his eyes. I think someone's ready for a nap, Isabella observed. I'm not tired, Mikey protested, even as he yawned again. How about we head back to your place, Graham suggested. Maybe watch a movie or something quiet. Isabella hesitated. Going to the park was one thing, but inviting Graham into her home felt like another level of intimacy. Seeing her hesitation, Graham quickly added, Or I can head home. You two probably have plans. No, we don't, Mikey said quickly. Please, come over, Mr. Graham. We can watch Spider-Man. Isabella looked at her son's hopeful face, then at Graham's carefully neutral expression. She knew he was giving her an out if she wanted it. A movie sounds nice, she said finally, but I should warn you, our apartment is nothing like your penthouse, I'm sure. Graham's smile returned. I'm not looking for luxury accommodations, Isabella. Just good company. Back at the apartment, Mikey insisted on giving Graham the grand tour, which took all of 3 minutes given the small space. And this is my room, Mikey said proudly, showing off his superhero posters and action figures. Very impressive collection, Graham said seriously, examining each toy that Mikey thrust into his hands. While they were occupied, Isabella quickly tidied the living room and set up the TV for the movie. She felt oddly nervous having Graham in. Her personal space, seeing how she lived. The apartment was small but clean and homey. Isabella had done her best to make it comfortable on her limited budget, with colorful throw pillows, framed photos, and Mikey's artwork decorating the walls. When Graham and Mikey emerged from the bedroom, Graham looked around appreciatively. Your home is lovely, he said sincerely. It's not much, Isabella said, feeling self-conscious. It's perfect, Graham replied. It feels like a real home. Something in his tone made Isabella wonder about his own living situation. Did his expensive penthouse feel empty, lonely? Before she could ponder it further, Mikey dragged Graham to the couch, eager to start the movie. Sit here, Mr. Graham, he instructed, patting the middle cushion. Mom, you sit on the other side. With a small smile, Isabella complied, acutely, aware of Graham's presence as she settled beside him on the small sofa. Their shoulders brushed, sending an unexpected tingle down her spine. Mikey's plan to watch the movie lasted all of 15 minutes before his exhaustion caught up with him. Soon his head was drooping against Graham's arm. I think Spider-Man is losing. His audience, Graham whispered, nodding toward the now sleeping Mikey. Isabella smiled softly. He wore himself out. Let me put him to bed. As she gently lifted Mikey, Graham stood. Should I go? He asked quietly. Isabella hesitated. The responsible answer was yes, but part of her wasn't ready for the day to end. You can stay if you want, she said. I'll just be a minute. When she returned from tucking Mikey in, she found Graham examining the photos on her bookshelf. He was looking at one of her and Mikey at the beach last summer, both of them laughing at the camera. You two look happy, he commented as she approached. We were. Mikey had just built his first sandcastle. She smiled at the memory. It was a rare day off. Graham turned to face her, his expression serious. You're an amazing mother, Isabella. The way you juggle everything, work, being a single parent, it's incredible. She shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. I do what I have to do. Mikey, that deserves the best life I can give him. Still, Graham insisted, it can't be easy. It's not, she admitted, but he's worth every struggle. Graham nodded, setting the photo back on the shelf. Would you like some coffee? I could make it while you rest. The offer was so unexpected and thoughtful that Isabella found herself smiling. That would be nice, kitchen's through there. As Graham busied himself in her tiny kitchen, Isabella sank onto the couch, suddenly aware of how tired she was. It had been a long, emotionally confusing week. Graham returned a few minutes later with 2 mugs of coffee. I hope I made it right. Cream? No sugar? Isabella looked surprised. How did you know? I notice things, Graham said simply, sitting beside her. They sipped their coffee in comfortable silence for a moment. Can I ask you something? Isabella said finally. Anything. Why me? Why us? She gestured around the apartment. This isn't your world, Graham. And until a few days ago, you barely spoke to me except about work. Graham set his mug down, considering his words carefully. Do you know what my life was like before I met Mikey? Really met him, I mean. Isabella shook her head. Empty, Graham said simply. I woke up in my expensive apartment, went to my corner office, made million-dollar deals, then went home to that same empty apartment. Day after day, year after year. He paused. I have everything money can buy, Isabella. But none of it matters. And now, she asked softly. Graham looked directly into her eyes. Now I feel like I'm waking up, like I've been sleepwalking through my life, and suddenly, I'm awake. The raw honesty in his voice made Isabella's heart skip. She'd never heard him speak this way. It scares me, she admitted, how quickly this is happening, how attached Mikey is getting to you. I would never hurt him, Graham said fiercely. Or you. Not intentionally, Isabella agreed. But what happens when you get bored with playing weekend dad? When the novelty wears off, Mikey's heart will be broken. Graham flinched as if she'd slapped him. Is that what you think this is? A game? I don't know what this is, Isabella said honestly. A week ago, you were the Ice King of Kingston Enterprises. Now you're sitting on my couch after spending the day pushing my son on swings. It's a lot to process. Graham was quiet for a long moment. I understand your caution. I do. But Isabella, what I feel for Mikey, for you, it's not a phase or a game, it's the most real thing I've felt in years. He reached out slowly, taking her hand in his. All I'm asking is a chance to show you this is real. Isabella looked down at their intertwined hands, feeling the warmth of his palm against hers. It would be so easy to believe him, to let herself fall into this unexpected connection. But what if she was wrong? One day at a time, she said finally, repeating her words from the night before. Graham nodded, seeming to understand the weight of what she was offering. One day at a time, he agreed. The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility. Graham's eyes dropped to her lips, and Isabella felt herself leaning slightly toward him. The shrill ring of a cell phone shattered the moment. Graham sighed, reaching into his pocket. I'm sorry. I need to check this. It might be important. Isabella nodded, pulling her hand away and reaching for her coffee mug. Graham frowned at his phone screen. It's Alexander, he said, sounding surprised. My brother. I should take this. We haven't spoken in months. Of course, Isabella said, giving him space. Graham stepped into the kitchen to take the call. Isabella couldn't hear the conversation clearly, but she could tell from Graham's tone that something was wrong. His voice grew increasingly tense. When he returned a few minutes later, his expression had darkened considerably. Everything okay? Isabella asked. Graham ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she'd never seen from him before. Not really. That was my brother, Alexander. Apparently there's an emergency board meeting on Monday morning that I knew nothing about. That's strange, Isabella said, frowning. As his executive assistant, she managed his calendar. No board meeting had been scheduled. It gets stranger, Graham continued. According to Alexander, several board members are concerned about the company's direction. There's talk of a vote of no confidence. Isabella gasped. They can't do that. The company's performance has been stellar under your leadership. Graham's smile was grim. Performance isn't always enough in corporate politics. Alexander has always wanted my position. It seems he may have finally found allies on the board. What will you do? Isabella asked. Prepare for battle, Graham replied, his expression hardening into the one she recognized from difficult business negotiations. I need to make some calls, review the latest financial reports. He stood, already shifting back into CEO mode. I should go. I'm sorry to cut the day short. Of course, Isabella said, rising as well. Is there anything I can do to help? Graham's expression softened slightly. You already have, more than you know. He hesitated, then added, Would it be all right if I called you tomorrow, just to check in? I'd like that, Isabella replied honestly. At the door, Graham paused. Thank you for today. It meant a lot to me. To us too, Isabella said softly. Graham leaned in, pressing a gentle kiss to her cheek, just as he had the night before. This time, though, he lingered a moment longer, his breath warm against her skin. Good night, Isabella, he whispered before pulling away. "Good night, Graham," she replied, her heart racing. After he left, Isabella leaned against the closed door, her thoughts in turmoil. In just 1 week, Graham Kingston had transformed from her stern, distant boss into, what? A friend? Something. More? And now, just as they were growing closer, this threat to his position at the company loomed. Isabella couldn't help but wonder what it might mean for them if Graham was ousted as CEO. The weekend passed in a blur. Graham called on Sunday as promised, but the conversation was brief and focused mainly on the upcoming board meeting. Isabella offered to come into the office to help prepare, but Graham insisted she enjoy her day with Mikey. "There's nothing you can do right now," he said, "but I appreciate the offer." Monday morning, Isabella arrived at the office earlier than usual, determined to support Graham however she could. She wasn't surprised to find his office light already on. "Good morning," she said, stepping into the doorway. "How are you holding up?" Graham looked up from his computer, his face haggard. Dark circles under his eyes suggested he hadn't slept much. "I've been better," he admitted, "but I'm ready for whatever Alexander has planned." "The board meeting is set for 9 a.m. in the main conference room," Isabella told him. "I've prepared copies of all the financial reports from the last quarter. They clearly show the company's growth under your leadership." Graham's expression softened. "Thank you, Isabella. You're always one step ahead." "It's my job," she said simply. "It's more than that," Graham replied, holding her gaze. "You care." The moment was interrupted by the arrival of other early employees. Isabella returned to her desk, trying to focus on her regular duties while anxiously watching the clock. At 8:55, board members began arriving for the meeting. Isabella greeted them professionally, offering coffee and directing them to the conference room. She noticed several avoiding her gaze, which only increased her concern. Alexander Kingston was the last to arrive, striding out of the elevator at precisely 8:59. Unlike his brother, Alexander had a slick charm that always struck Isabella as slightly insincere. Today, he practically radiated smugness. "Good morning, Isabella," he said smoothly. "Lovely day, isn't it?" Before she could respond, Graham emerged from his office. The contrast between the brothers was striking. Where Alexander was all polished surfaces and artificial charm, Graham had an authentic strength that commanded respect. "Alexander," Graham said coldly, "let's get this over with." The brothers entered the conference room, and Isabella was left to wait anxiously at her desk. The minutes crawled by like hours. She was surprised when the door opened just 20 minutes later. Board members filed out, their expressions unreadable. Alexander emerged last, his face tight with barely controlled anger. He stalked past Isabella's desk without a word. Graham appeared in the doorway, his posture relaxed, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "What happened?" Isabella asked once everyone had dispersed. "Alexander overplayed his hand," Graham replied, satisfaction evident in his voice. "I thought he had enough support to challenge me, but he was wrong." Relief flooded Isabella. "So you're still CEO?" "Firmly so," Graham confirmed. "The board reaffirmed their confidence in my leadership. Alexander's little coup attempt failed miserably." "I'm glad," Isabella said sincerely. Graham's smile faded slightly. "There's one complication, though. The board is concerned about my recent distraction." "Distraction?" Isabella repeated, a knot forming in her stomach. Graham sighed. "Apparently my brother has been suggesting that my judgment is compromised, that I'm making decisions based on personal feelings rather than business sense." Isabella felt a chill. "He means me, doesn't he? And Mikey?" Graham nodded grimly. "Alexander somehow found out about our time together this weekend. He tried to use it against me, implying I was neglecting my duties." "I'm so sorry," Isabella said, feeling suddenly guilty. "I never meant to cause problems for you." "Don't," Graham said sharply. "This isn't your fault. Alexander has been looking for a way to undermine me for years. If it wasn't this, it would have been something else." Still, Isabella couldn't help but feel responsible. "What happens now?" Graham hesitated. "The board suggested it might be better if I kept my personal and professional lives separate to avoid any appearance of impropriety." Isabella's heart sank. "So this weekend, everything that happened between us is exactly what I want," Graham interrupted firmly. "The board doesn't dictate my personal life, Isabella." They can advise all they want, but my feelings for you and Mikey haven't changed. Relief washed over her. Really? Really, Graham confirmed. But there is one change we need to make. What's that? Graham took a deep breath. For appearances, Serke, and to protect your professional reputation, I think it would be best if you transferred to another department. The suggestion hit Isabella like a bucket of cold water. You want me to leave my position? Not leave the company, Graham clarified quickly. Just move to a different role, one where you don't report directly to me. It made sense, of course. Dating her boss would invite gossip and questions about favoritism, but Isabella had worked hard to become his executive assistant. The position came with prestige and a salary that allowed her to provide for Mikey. What kind of role? She asked, cautiously. How would you feel about heading up our new community outreach program? Graham suggested. It would be a promotion with better pay and more regular hours. You'd be perfect for it. The offer was generous, more than generous, but Isabella couldn't help feeling like she was being pushed aside. I need to think about it, she said finally. Graham nodded. Of course, take all the time you need. He hesitated, then added, This doesn't change anything between us, Isabella. It's just to protect both our professional reputations. Isabella nodded, trying to process everything. In the span of a few days, her entire life had been turned upside down. And now, just as she was beginning to accept her feelings for Graham, another complication arose. I should get back to work, she said, needing space to think. Of course, Graham agreed. As she turned to leave, he added softly, Isabella? She looked back. Yes? Are we still on for dinner tonight? With Mikey? Despite her confusion, Isabella found herself smiling. Yes, we are. He's been talking about it all weekend. Graham's relief was palpable. Good. That's good. As Isabella returned to her desk, her mind raced with conflicting emotions. On one hand, she was thrilled that Graham had stood up to his brother and the board. On the other, the idea of changing positions, of no longer working directly with him every day, left her feeling adrift. And there was Alexander to consider. He had clearly targeted Graham's relationship with her and Mikey. Would he stop now, or was this just the beginning of his campaign against his brother? The day passed in a blur of routine tasks and distracted thoughts. By the time Isabella left to pick up Mikey from her mother's house, she still hadn't reached a decision about Graham's offer. How was your day, baby? She asked Mikey as they walked home. Good, I drew a picture of you and me and Mr. Graham at the park, Mikey said excitedly, pulling a colorful drawing from his backpack. Isabella examined the crayon masterpiece. 3 stick figures stood holding hands, one tall with black hair, one medium with brown curls, and one small with matching brown curls. Family was written across the top in Mikey's wobbly handwriting. It's beautiful, Mikey, she said, a lump forming in her throat. Can I show it to Mr. Graham tonight? He asked hopefully. Of course you can, Isabella replied, her heart both warming and breaking at her son's innocent attachment to Graham. As they approached their apartment building, Isabella was surprised to see a sleek black car parked outside. Even more surprising was the man leaning against it, Alexander Kingston. Wait here a moment, Mikey, Isabella said, stopping a few yards away. I need to talk to someone from work. She approached Alexander cautiously. Mr. Kingston, what are you doing here? Alexander straightened, his smile not reaching his eyes. Isabella, just the person I wanted to see, and please call me Alexander. How did you know where I live? She asked, immediately on guard. I have my resources, he replied smoothly. I wanted to have a private conversation with you, away from my brother's watchful eye. Isabella glanced back at Mikey, who was watching them curiously. This isn't a good time. It won't take long, Alexander promised. I just wanted to make you an offer. What kind of offer? Isabella asked, her suspicion growing. Alexander's smile widened. A generous one. $500,000 to be exact. Isabella blinked in shock. Excuse me? $500,000, Alexander repeated. Tax-free. All you have to do is walk away from Graham. Leave Kingston Enterprises and take your son with you. Isabella felt her blood boil. You're trying to bribe me to break up with your brother? Alexander shrugged. I prefer to think of it as compensation for your inconvenience. Let's be realistic, Isabella. A man like Graham doesn't end up with a single mother from the Bronx. This little infatuation will run its course, and where will that leave you? Without her job, most likely. You don't know anything about us, Isabella said coldly. I know my brother, Alexander countered. He gets bored easily. Always has. He pulled an envelope from his jacket. Think about your son, Isabella. Think about what this money could do for his future. College fund, better neighborhood, private school. Isabella stared at the envelope, then back at Alexander's smug face. Without a word, she turned and walked back to Mikey. Mom? Who was that man? Mikey asked as she took his hand. Nobody important, baby, she replied, leading him into the building. Let's go get ready for dinner. As they entered the elevator, Isabella could feel Alexander watching them from the street. His offer echoed in her mind, along with his cruel insinuations about Graham's intentions. Was Alexander right? Was Graham's interest in them just a temporary infatuation? The thought made her stomach churn. By the time they reached their apartment, Isabella had made her decision. Tonight, she would have an honest conversation with Graham. She needed to know exactly what he wanted from this relationship before she and Mikey got in any deeper. As she helped Mikey change for dinner, Isabella's phone rang. It was Graham. Hi, she answered, trying to sound normal. Isabella? Graham's voice was tight with anger. Did my brother approach you today? She froze. How did you know? He just called to gloat about it, Graham growled. Isabella, whatever he said, whatever he offered you, $500,000, she interrupted quietly. To walk away from you and leave the company. There was a moment of stunned silence. That bastard, Graham finally said. Isabella, I'm so sorry. Alexander has always been jealous, but this is a new low even for him. Why does he hate you so much? Isabella asked. Graham sighed heavily. It's a long story. Family history, inheritance disputes. Nothing that justifies what he did today. He paused. Did you consider his offer? The hesitation in his voice made Isabella's heart ache. Not for a second, she said firmly. The relief in Graham's voice was palpable. I'll be there in 30 minutes. And Isabella, we need to talk about what happened today. All of it. I know, she agreed. We do. After hanging up, Isabella looked at Mikey happily playing with his toys, oblivious to the adult complications swirling around him. She thought of his drawing, the three of them holding hands, family written across the top. In just a few days, Graham Kingston had upended their carefully structured lives. The question was, would he stay long enough to become the family Mikey was already imagining? Or would Alexander's prediction prove true? Tonight, Isabella was determined to find out. Isabella paced her small living room, Alexander's words echoing in her mind. Despite her firm rejection of his offer, doubt had crept in. Was Graham's interest in her and Mikey just a passing fancy, as Alexander had suggested? Mom, is Mr. Graham coming soon? Mikey asked, interrupting her troubled thoughts. He had changed into his favorite blue shirt and even attempted to smooth down his unruly curls. Yes, baby. He'll be here any minute, Isabella replied, forcing a smile. As if on cue, the doorbell rang. Mikey ran to answer it, but Isabella caught him gently by the shoulder. Let me get it first, okay? When she opened the door, Graham stood there with a bouquet of wildflowers in one hand and a small gift bag in the other. His expression was a mixture of anger and concern. Are you okay? He asked immediately. I'm fine, Isabella assured him, accepting the flowers. Thank you. These are beautiful. Mr. Graham, Mikey exclaimed, unable to contain himself any longer. He rushed forward, wrapping his arms around Graham's legs. I drew you a picture. Graham's tension visibly melted as he smiled down at Mikey. You did? I can't wait to see it. Come on. Mikey grabbed Graham's hand, pulling him toward the kitchen table where the drawing was proudly displayed. Graham examined the crayon artwork with serious attention. This is us at the park, he said, recognizing the stick figures. Yep, and see? What I wrote at the top? Mikey pointed proudly. Graham's expression softened as he read the word. Family, he said quietly, his voice catching slightly. Isabella watched the exchange, her heart tight in her chest. The genuine emotion on Graham's face didn't look like someone experiencing a temporary infatuation. I brought you something too, Graham told Mikey, handing him the gift bag. Inside was a small model construction set, a miniature version of the robot award that had fascinated Mikey in Graham's office that first day. Wow, thanks, Mr. Graham, Mikey exclaimed, immediately opening the box. Why don't you set that up while I talk to your mum for a few minutes, Graham suggested. Once Mikey was settled at the coffee table with his new toy, Graham turned to Isabella. Can we talk privately? She nodded, leading him to the small balcony off the living room. It wasn't much, just enough space for 2 chairs and a tiny potted plant, but it offered privacy. I'm so sorry about Alexander, Graham began once they were seated. What he did was unforgivable. It wasn't just the bribe, Graham, Isabella said quietly. It was what he said about us. About your intentions. Graham's jaw tightened. What exactly did he say? Isabella hesitated, then decided. Complete honesty was necessary. He said this is just an infatuation for you. That you'll get bored eventually, and I'll be left without a job. Graham's eyes flashed with anger. Alexander has always thought the worst of me. Ever since we were children, he's assumed my motives were as selfish and calculating as his own. And, are they? Isabella asked directly, meeting his gaze. Graham looked surprised, then hurt. Do you really need to ask that? I need to know, Graham, Isabella insisted. This isn't just about me. Mikey is already so attached to you. He drew us as a family today. I can't let him get hurt. Graham was quiet for a long moment, gathering his thoughts. I understand. Your caution, he said finally. Given how quickly all this has happened, it's reasonable for you to have doubts. He leaned forward, his expression earnest. Isabella, I'm not good at talking about feelings. I never have been. My father taught me that emotions were a weakness in business. Show nothing, feel nothing. That was his motto. That sounds lonely, Isabella said softly. It was, Graham agreed. Until last week, my entire life was about the company. I measured my worth by profit margins and stock prices. He shook his head. Then Mikey broke my coffee mug, and somehow that small moment changed everything. How? Isabella asked, genuinely curious. Graham smiled slightly. He wasn't afraid to admit he'd made a mistake. His first instinct was to apologize, to make it right. Do you know how rare that is in my world? Everyone lies, everyone covers up their mistakes, everyone has an agenda. He reached across the small space between them, taking her hand in his. Mikey showed me what I've been missing all these years. And you, watching you with him, seeing how you've built this wonderful life for the two of you despite all the challenges, it woke something in me, Isabella. Something I thought was long dead. What's that? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Hope, Graham said simply. Hope that it's not too late for me to have what really matters in life. The sincerity in his eyes made Isabella's doubts begin to fade. No one could fake the emotion she saw there. Alexander was right about one thing, Graham continued. A man like me doesn't usually end up with a single mother from the Bronx. He squeezed her hand gently. But only because I never deserved someone as strong and amazing as you. Isabella felt tears prick at her eyes. Graham, let me finish, he said softly. You asked for honesty and you deserve it. I don't know what the future holds for us, Isabella. I can't promise that everything will be perfect or easy, but I can promise you this. What I feel for you and Mikey isn't temporary. It's the most real thing I've ever felt. Isabella believed him, despite all the reasons to be cautious, despite Alexander's warnings, despite the whirlwind pace of their connection. She believed him. I believe you, she said aloud, squeezing his hand in return. Relief washed over Graham's face. Thank you, he said quietly. They sat in silence for a moment, the city noise a distant backdrop to the intimacy of their conversation. What about the job offer? Isabella asked eventually. The community outreach position? Graham straightened slightly. The offer stands, but it's entirely your choice. If you want to remain my executive assistant, I'll find another way to address the board's concerns. And if I take it, Isabella asked. Then you'll be brilliant at it, Graham said confidently. And we can explore this relationship without professional complications. Isabella nodded, considering. The regular hours would mean more time with Mikey. And the salary increase wouldn't hurt, Graham added with a small smile. You're sure the board won't object to us dating, as long as I'm not directly reporting to you? Isabella asked. They might gossip, but they can't dictate my personal life, Graham said firmly. Besides, after today's meeting, Alexander's influence has been significantly diminished. Isabella thought for a moment longer, then nodded. I'll take the position. It sounds like a good opportunity, and it would be nice not to worry about conflicts of interest. Graham's smile widened. You'll be perfect for it. The program needs someone with both business sense and genuine compassion. You have both in abundance. From inside they heard Mikey calling, Mum, Mr. Graham, come see what I built. We should go back in, Isabella said, standing. Graham rose as well, but caught her hand before she could move toward the door. Isabella, there's one more thing. What is it? Instead of answering, Graham leaned down and kissed her gently. Unlike the chaste kisses on the cheek he'd given her before, this was a real kiss, soft yet certain, conveying everything words couldn't express. When they parted, Isabella felt breathless. What was that for? She whispered. Graham smiled, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. I've been wanting to do that since that first lunch with Mikey. Mom! Mr. Graham! Mikey called again, more insistently. Graham chuckled. We'd better not keep him waiting. Back inside, Mikey proudly showed them the robot he'd assembled from the model kit. Look, I did it all by myself. It's awesome, lil buddy, Graham said, kneeling beside him. You're quite the engineer. Can we still go? To dinner? Mikey asked hopefully. I'm hungry. Isabella and Graham exchanged a smile. Yes, we can still go to dinner, Isabella assured him. As they prepared to leave, Isabella's phone rang. It was her mother. Hi, Mum. Is everything okay? She answered. Her mother's voice was tight with worry. Isabella, there's a strange man here, asking questions about you and Mikey. He says he's your boss's brother. Isabella's blood ran cold. Alexander, she whispered, looking at Graham with alarm. Graham's expression darkened immediately. What's happening? He asked. Isabella put the phone on speaker. Mom, this is Graham Kingston, my boss. What exactly did his brother say to you? He wanted to know about Mikey's father, her mother replied. Asked if he was still in the picture, if there was any custody arrangement. It felt threatening. Graham's jaw clenched. Mrs. Carter, this is Graham. I'm so sorry about this. My brother is troubled. Please don't tell him anything. We're on our way to you now. After getting her mother's address, Graham helped Isabella and Mikey into his car. The drive to her mother's apartment in Queens was tense. Why is Alexander doing this? Isabella asked, keeping her voice low so Mikey wouldn't hear from the back seat. Graham's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. He's always been ruthless in business, but this is crossing a line. He's trying to scare you away from me. By investigating Mikey's father? Isabella frowned. There's nothing to find. He signed away his rights before Mikey was born. Alexander doesn't know that, Graham pointed out. He's fishing for leverage. When they arrived at her mother's building, Alexander's black car was still parked outside. Graham's expression turned thunderous. Wait here, he told Isabella firmly. I need to deal with this. Graham, Isabella began, worried. Trust me, he said, his voice gentler. I won't do anything rash. I just need to make it clear that this stops now. Isabella hesitated, then nodded. We'll wait 5 minutes, then I'm coming in. Graham exited the car and entered the building, his posture rigid with anger. Mom, why are we at Grandma's? Mikey asked from the back seat. I thought we were going to dinner. We will, baby, Isabella assured him. We just need to check on Grandma first. The minutes ticked by slowly. Isabella watched the entrance, anxiety building with each passing moment. Just as she was about to go in, Graham emerged with Alexander behind him. Even from a distance, it was clear the conversation was heated. Graham's face was flushed with anger, while Alexander looked defensive and sullen. Isabella couldn't hear what was being said, but Graham's body language was unmistakable. He was laying down the law to his brother in no uncertain terms. Finally, Alexander turned away, striding to his car without looking back. Graham watched him drive away before returning to Isabella. "Is everything okay?" she asked as he slid back into the driver's seat. "It is now," Graham said grimly. "I made it perfectly clear what would happen if he ever approached you, Mikey, or any member of your family again." "What did you say to him?" Isabella asked. Graham glanced in the rear-view mirror, ensuring Mikey wasn't paying attention. "I reminded him that as CEO I control his trust fund, and that if he continues this campaign against us, I'll cut him off completely." "Would you really do that?" Isabella asked, surprised by the hardness in Graham's voice. "In a heartbeat?" Graham confirmed. "Family is important, but not when they threaten the people I care about." The conviction in his voice was both reassuring and slightly intimidating. This was the side of Graham that had earned him his reputation in business: decisive, uncompromising, and fiercely protective of what he valued. They went upstairs to check on Isabella's mother, who was visibly shaken by Alexander's visit but otherwise fine. "I'm so sorry about this, Mrs. Carter," Graham said sincerely. "I promise it won't happen again." Isabella's mother studied Graham carefully. "So you're the famous Mr. Kingston," she said finally. "The one Mikey hasn't stopped talking about all week." Graham smiled slightly. "I hope what he said has been positive." "Very," her mother confirmed, "though I have to say you're not what I expected." "Mom," Isabella warned, but Graham seemed amused. "What did you expect, Mrs. Carter?" "Someone colder," she admitted frankly. "The way Isabella described you before last week? Well, let's just say warm wasn't the first word that came to mind." Graham chuckled. "That's a fair assessment of how I used to be. Your grandson and daughter have had quite an effect on me." Mrs. Carter's expression softened slightly. "So I see." She turned to Isabella. "He seems decent, unlike the last one." "Mom!" Isabella exclaimed, mortified. Graham's eyes twinkled with suppressed laughter. High praise indeed, after ensuring Mrs. Carter was truly all right. They finally headed to dinner. The evening was subdued at first, the confrontation with Alexander casting a shadow over their plans. But Mikey, with his boundless enthusiasm and innocence, soon had them all smiling again. He regaled Graham with stories from school, asked a million questions about the robot model, and generally reminded the adults what really mattered. By the time dessert arrived, an enormous ice cream sundae that Mikey insisted on sharing with everyone, the tension had dissipated. As they walked back to the car after dinner, Mikey between them holding both their hands, Isabella felt a sense of rightness that she couldn't explain. Despite the complications, despite Alexander's threats, despite the whirlwind pace of it all, this felt right. "Can Mr. Graham come over tomorrow too?" Mikey asked as Graham helped him into his car seat. Graham glanced at Isabella, letting her take the lead. "Maybe," she said carefully. "We'll have to see." "But I want to show him my school project," Mikey persisted. "Tell you what, lil buddy," Graham said. "How about I come to your school play next week? Your mum mentioned it's on Thursday night." Mikey's eyes widened with excitement. "Really? You'll come see me be a tree?" Graham laughed. "I wouldn't miss it for the world." On the drive back to Isabella's apartment, Mikey fell asleep in the back seat, worn out by the day's excitement. "He's out cold," Graham observed, glancing in the rearview mirror. Isabella smiled fondly. "Big emotions, big crash afterward. That's Mikey." They drove in comfortable silence for a few minutes. "Do you think Alexander will cause more trouble?" Isabella asked finally, voicing her lingering concern. Graham considered the question seriously. "He might try, but I meant what I said. I'll protect you and Mikey, no matter what. I've always protected us myself," Isabella said quietly. "It's strange to have someone else wanting to fight our battles." "You don't have to face everything alone anymore, Isabella," Graham said gently. "Not if you don't want to." The words hung between them, full of promise and possibility. When they arrived at her building, Graham carefully lifted the sleeping Mikey from his car seat. Isabella led the way upstairs, opening doors as Graham carried Mikey to his bedroom. With practiced ease, Isabella changed Mikey into his pajamas without waking him. Graham watched from the doorway, a soft expression on his face. "You make it look so easy," he whispered as she tucked the blankets around Mikey's small form. "Years of practice," Isabella replied, brushing a curl from Mikey's forehead. "He sleeps like a rock." They retreated to the living room, both feeling the weight of the day's events. "Thank you for handling Alexander," Isabella said, sinking onto the couch. "And for being so good with Mikey through all of this." "No thanks needed," Graham replied, sitting beside her. "I meant what I said earlier, Isabella. You and Mikey have become important to me, more important than I could have imagined a week ago." Isabella leaned her head against his shoulder, suddenly exhausted. "It's been quite a week, hasn't it?" Graham chuckled, wrapping an arm around her. "The best week of my life, despite Alexander's interference." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. "I should probably go," Graham said eventually, though he made no move to leave. "You must be tired." "Stay a little." "Longer?" Isabella asked, surprising herself with the request. Graham smiled, tightening his arm around her. "As long as you want." 2 months later, Isabella stood in her new office, arranging the framed photos on her desk. Her favorite showed Mikey at his school play, beaming proudly in his tree costume with Graham standing beside him, looking equally proud. The transition to her new role as Director of Community Outreach had been smoother than expected. She loved the work, establishing partnerships with local schools, organizing volunteer opportunities for Kingston employees, designing a scholarship program for underprivileged students. And Graham had been right. The regular hours meant more time with Mikey. No more late nights at the office, no more weekend emergencies. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Graham stood in the doorway, a bouquet of wildflowers in hand, the same kind he'd brought that night at her apartment. "Delivery for the brilliant Director of Community Outreach," he said with a smile. Isabella laughed, accepting the flowers. "What's the occasion?" 2 months since Mikey broke my coffee mug," Graham replied. "Best day of my life." Isabella shook her head, amused by his sentimentality. The Ice King reputation seemed laughable now, knowing how warm Graham truly was. "Are we still on for the zoo this weekend?" Graham asked, perching on the edge of her desk. "Mikey's been talking about it all week." "Of course," Isabella replied. "He's got the whole day planned. Tigers first, then the reptile house, then ice cream." Graham chuckled. "Sounds perfect." He hesitated slightly, reaching into his pocket. "There's something I wanted to ask you, actually." "What is it?" Isabella asked, noting his sudden nervousness. Graham pulled out a small key with a ribbon tied around it. "I was wondering if you and Mikey might consider moving in with me. My penthouse has plenty of room, and it's closer to Mikey's school, and—" Isabella pressed a finger to his lips, stopping his nervous ramble. "Are you sure about this? It's a big step." Graham nodded, completely serious. "I've never been more sure of anything. My place feels empty without you two, and practically speaking, we're together most nights anyway." It was true. Over the past 2 months, Graham had become a fixture in their lives. He read Mikey bedtime stories, helped with homework, and spent every weekend with them. They'd fallen into a family routine so naturally that sometimes Isabella forgot how recently he'd entered their lives. "What about Mikey?" she asked. "It's a big change for him." Graham smiled. "I already asked him what he thought about it. He's very excited about the building's swimming pool." "You asked my 6-year-old before asking me?" Isabella laughed in disbelief. "I needed to know if he was on board," Graham said seriously. "His opinion matters just as much as yours." The thoughtfulness of the gesture warmed Isabella's heart. This was why she'd fallen in love with Graham. His genuine care for Mikey, his consideration of their needs, his desire to be part of their family. "Yes," she said simply. Graham's eyes lit up. "Yes?" Isabella nodded, taking the key from his hand. "Yes, we'll move in with you." Graham gathered her in his arms, lifting her off her feet in his excitement. "You've made me the happiest man in New York," he whispered against her hair. As he set her down, Isabella regarded him seriously. "There's one condition, though." "Anything," Graham promised immediately. "You have to let Mikey bring his entire robot collection, all 27 of them." Graham laughed, the sound echoing in her office. "I wouldn't have it any other way." That evening, as the 3 of them walked home from dinner, Mikey chattering excitedly about having his own room in Graham's apartment, Isabella marveled at how much her life had changed in just 2 months. All because of one broken coffee mug and a little boy who saw the good in a man everyone else thought was cold. "Penny for your thoughts," Graham said softly, taking her hand as they walked. Isabella smiled up at him. "I was just thinking about how lucky we are. How one small moment changed everything." Graham squeezed her hand. "The moment Mikey walked into my office was the moment my real life began. Everything before was just waiting." "For us?" Isabella asked. "For us," Graham confirmed. "For family." Ahead of them, Mikey turned around, walking backward to face them. "Can I tell Grandma about the new apartment? She can come swimming too." "Of course she can, baby," Isabella assured him. "And can I tell my class? Tyler won't believe I'm going to live in a building with a swimming pool," Graham chuckled. "You can tell everyone, lil buddy." Satisfied, Mikey turned back around, skipping a few steps ahead. "He's so happy," Isabella observed. "Are you?" Graham asked, a hint of vulnerability in his voice. Isabella stopped walking, turning to face him fully. "Happier than I ever thought possible." Graham's face softened. "Me too." He leaned down, kissing her gently. "I love you, Isabella Carter." It was the first time he'd said the words aloud, though his actions had been showing it for weeks. "I love you too, Graham Kingston," she replied, her heart full. "Who kissing?" Mikey exclaimed, having turned around again to find them embracing. Graham laughed, scooping Mikey up into his arms. "Better get used to it, lil buddy. I plan on kissing your mom a lot." "Gross," Mikey declared, though he was giggling. "Tell you." "What?" Graham said conspiratorially. "How about ice cream to make up for it?" "Yeah," Mikey cheered, previous objections forgotten. As they continued down the street, now headed for the ice cream shop, Isabella felt a sense of contentment she'd never known before. Their path forward wouldn't always be smooth. Alexander was still a concern, and blending their lives would have challenges, but they would face it all together. A single mother, a billionaire boss, a little boy who changed everything, and a love story that no one saw coming. Sometimes the most unexpected beginnings led to the most beautiful outcomes. And sometimes all it took was one broken coffee mug to find a family you never knew you needed. The end.